On Wednesday morning during breakfast, Patricia dropped another piece of the puzzle that Daniel had been wrestling with for over a week. "Matt's going to give you a call today," she mentioned casually, almost as if it wasn't worth much thought. Daniel felt a jolt of surprise and immediately wondered, "Why is he calling me?" Noticing the confusion on his face, Patricia explained, "He wants to talk to you and make sure you're okay with us having dinner together." "Why?" Daniel asked, genuinely shocked. "What do you mean, why?" Patricia responded. "Why does he need to talk to me?" Daniel pressed. "You've already told him you're going, and you told me the same, so it's already settled. You're having dinner with him. Why does he need to call me now?" His frustration was building. Is this just some kind of formality because he's a gentleman? Is he asking my permission to date my wife, and that's supposed to make him considerate? Daniel added, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Patricia, clearly irritated, shot back, "Daniel, I've told you over and over, this dinner isn't a date. It's just a dinner with a man I'm working with on the city's climate change initiative. That's it. There's nothing more to it. Stop turning it into something it's not." She was on the verge of raising her voice but managed to hold back. "Fine, fine. I get it," Daniel replied sharply. "But what if I say no?" His question was met with a sharp glare from Patricia. "What do you mean, what if you say no?" "I mean, when Matt calls and asks if I'm okay with him taking you to dinner, what if I tell him no?" Daniel clarified, his tone serious. Patricia's annoyance was obvious. First of all, he's not asking for permission. Second, we're both grown-ups, and we don't need your approval. This is just him being polite, Daniel. He's just checking to see if you're comfortable with us having this business dinner. And what if I still say no?" Daniel interrupted. With a sigh, Patricia replied, "Daniel, I know you too well. You're not going to say no. You'll be your usual polite self, tell him everything's fine, and that you're okay with it. Stop trying to provoke me. Just talk to him like the cultured, sophisticated man I know you are. Put both him and yourself at ease about this dinner, all right?" Daniel wasn't thrilled with the situation, but he realized there wasn't much he could do about it. It didn't take long for him to accept his role in all of this. He'd have to play along and support Patricia's dinner with Matt Adams. He'd have a conversation with Matt, listen to what he had to say, and maybe gain some insight. Matt Adams wasn't just some random guy. He was a globally recognized expert on climate change, with numerous publications and at least 6 books under his belt. He had lectured at major universities across the US, UK, and Europe and regularly appeared on CNN, Fox News, BBC, and other major networks. His social media following was huge, with nearly 1 million subscribers on his blog, and he had even testified before Senate and House committees on climate change. In short, Matt was a big deal in the climate change world. What puzzled Daniel, though, was how Patricia had initially said she'd be having dinner with her entire climate change strategy team. Over the next few days, that story changed to just a few members of the team. And then, last week, she told Daniel it would only be Matt. According to her, they needed one-on-one time to brainstorm ideas and strategies before presenting them to the team. The shifting story made Daniel suspicious, and now, with Matt's upcoming call, his concern only grew. Even though Daniel tried to convince himself that he was okay with the dinner, his suspicions only deepened. Still, he didn't have much of a choice but to go along with it. "Fine," Daniel eventually said. "Tell him to give me a call. If I don't pick up, he can leave a message, and I'll get back to him." He let Patricia know that he didn't have the time for a drawn-out phone conversation and suggested she answer and speak to Matt directly. Patricia, slightly annoyed, reminded him that she was also busy, especially with all the preparations for her upcoming 4-week trip to India. They both acknowledged their hectic schedules, but Daniel insisted she should take the call, saying it would help ease any tension about the dinner on Friday night. Reluctantly, Patricia agreed, promising she'd answer when Matt called. After that slightly awkward exchange, their conversation shifted back to their usual daily plans, and soon after, they went their separate ways for the day. Despite moving on from the conversation, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Matt's impending call. He spent the rest of the day waiting for it, and just before 4 p.m., the call finally came in. The two men exchanged pleasantries, with Daniel making it clear that he didn't object to Matt taking Patricia out for dinner. For his part, Matt reassured Daniel, albeit in a somewhat roundabout way, that the dinner was strictly business. He mentioned he would pick Patricia up at 6, they'd eat at an upscale restaurant, and she'd be back home by 10 p.m. at the latest. Everything sounded perfectly innocent, but Daniel couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that there was more going on. In fact, by the end of the conversation, he felt even more uneasy, convinced that something wasn't quite right between Patricia and Matt. The rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday passed without much incident, and the dinner wasn't brought up again. On the surface, things seemed normal between Daniel and Patricia, but his suspicions kept growing louder in his mind. By Friday morning, the anxiety had settled in, and Daniel found himself wide awake, sitting at his desk with his second cup of coffee. The day he had been dreading had finally arrived, and the thought of Patricia's dinner with Matt weighed heavily on him. He knew there was no point in voicing his concerns, it would be futile, but that didn't stop the flood of doubts that overwhelmed him. At around 9 a.m., Patricia came into his office to let him know she was heading out to get her hair and nails done. Before Daniel could even respond, she was already out the door. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the fact that Patricia was getting all dolled up, supposedly for him. A few hours later, Patricia returned from the salon, looking stunning with her freshly styled hair and bright red nails. She quickly stopped by Daniel's office, asking for his opinion on her look before heading upstairs to their bedroom to continue getting ready. As the afternoon went on, it became painfully clear to Daniel that Patricia wasn't dressing up for him, she was getting ready for Matt. That thought only fueled his suspicions about what this dinner was really about. By 5:30 p.m., Daniel left his office and headed to the living room, preparing himself for Matt's arrival. As he stood there, he mentally rehearsed how he would act, what he would say, and how he'd handle watching them leave together. At around 5:50 p.m., he heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. His stomach churned with dread as he watched Matt step out of the car. Rather than answering the door immediately, Daniel let Matt ring the doorbell and knock a few times before he finally opened the door and invited him in. The tension was thick as the two men exchanged polite greetings, both well aware of how uncomfortable the situation was. Daniel couldn't escape the thought that, in his mind, Matt was about to take his wife out on what felt like a date. And there was nothing he could do to stop it without making a scene. Although Daniel was more than capable of confronting Matt, he held himself back, keeping his cool. Matt seemed eager to pick Patricia up and leave, while Daniel just wanted to get through the moment without any unnecessary drama. They exchanged pleasantries, but Daniel, still feeling uneasy, didn't invite Matt to sit down. Instead, he left him standing by the door as he went upstairs to get Patricia. "Your date's here," Daniel said as he entered the bedroom. Patricia, still making some final adjustments to her look, glanced at him and asked, "Do I look okay?" Her hair was perfectly styled, framing her face flawlessly, and her long blonde hair shimmered as it fell over her shoulders. Daniel hesitated for a moment, his eyes lingering on her. "Is that a new dress?" he asked. Patricia sighed and admitted, "Yes, and the shoes too." "Daniel, this is the outfit I bought for us to go out in, but I figured I'd try it tonight to see how it feels." She paused, then asked, "So, how do I look?" "You honestly look like you're heading out on a hot date," Daniel replied. "I just want to look good," Patricia said simply. "You do look good, but you also look pretty hot," Daniel added, his tone more direct. Patricia didn't respond immediately, so Daniel pressed further. "Is that what you're going for? Trying to look hot for this guy?" In a measured tone, Patricia quickly clarified, "No, that's not what I'm aiming for. I just want to look nice." You do look nice, Daniel acknowledged, but you also look like you're dressed to impress, maybe even seduce. His words hung in the air. We're just two colleagues going out for dinner, Patricia retorted. That's it. I want to look good, get your mind out of the gutter. Well, he's waiting for you. I'll walk you downstairs, like I'm your dad sending you off on a date, Daniel teased with a smirk. Stop it, Daniel. This isn't a date, Patricia scolded as they made their way downstairs. When Patricia reached the foyer, Matt's eyes lit up. Wow, Patricia, you look stunning, he exclaimed. Patricia walked down the steps while Daniel lingered halfway, watching quietly. Thanks, Matt. You're looking sharp yourself, she replied, giving him a friendly hug that struck Daniel as a little too intimate for two colleagues. But what did he know? He wasn't part of the climate change culture, as he sarcastically thought to himself. Catching sight of the hug, Daniel descended the stairs. After a few more moments of light conversation, they all headed outside toward Matt's car. Ever the gentleman, Matt opened the car door for Patricia, who slid into the passenger seat, revealing a good amount of leg in the process. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, his eyes catching the glimpse of her stockings and thong, which left him speechless. He fought back the urge to stop them from leaving but restrained himself, not wanting to make a scene or embarrass her. Instead, Daniel walked over to Matt's side of the car and bluntly warned, "Don't turn this dinner into something you'll regret." A bit taken aback, Matt met Daniel's gaze and reassured him, "It's just dinner, Daniel. We're talking about the project. That's all." "We'll see," Daniel responded with a cynical edge. Matt shrugged off Daniel's attitude, opened his door, and got into the driver's seat. Daniel stood there in the driveway, watching as they drove away, before finally heading back inside. He tried to distract himself with work, hoping to focus on something other than Patricia being out with Matt, but it was no use. His mind kept replaying the way she had boldly revealed herself, and the worry about what might happen between her and Matt gnawed at him for the rest of the evening. The evening seemed to stretch on endlessly, leaving Daniel in a state of anxious anticipation for Patricia's return. By 10 p.m., his restlessness had taken over. He had expected her back by now, but as the clock ticked past 10:30 p.m. with no sign of her, his worry began to shift into frustration. The frustration soon gave way to anger, but instead of reaching out, Daniel chose not to call or text. He decided to let the night play out, however it would, and face it when the time came. When 11 p.m. came and went with no sign of Patricia, the strain started to weigh heavily on him. Mentally exhausted from the anxiety her absence was causing, Daniel finally lay down. He tossed and turned for nearly an hour before finally drifting off to sleep around midnight. Sometime later, the glare of headlights sweeping across the bedroom window startled him awake. Patricia had finally come home. Sitting up, Daniel muttered to his assistant, "Alexa, what time is it?" "The time is 2:21 a.m., Alexa's voice responded. Damn it, Daniel cursed under his breath. He stayed in bed, listening closely as Patricia and Matt's muffled voices floated up from the driveway below. The front door opened and closed, followed by the sound of Matt's car engine fading into the early morning distance. No explanation, no apology for how late it was, Matt had simply dropped her off and left. Now, Patricia would have to deal with Daniel on her own. So much for Matt being the gentleman, Daniel thought bitterly as he heard the hum of the car disappear down the road. Moments later, Patricia quietly crept up the stairs, trying her best not to make any noise. She slipped into the bedroom, barely making her presence known. In a calm but serious voice, Daniel spoke, "Patricia." Startled, Patricia jumped slightly. "Oh, Daniel, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "Apologies for the late hour," she said, her voice laced with worry. "What time is it?" Daniel asked softly, his tone carrying the weight of his thoughts. "It's late, Daniel. Just go back to sleep." "I'll be in bed in a minute," Patricia replied, clearly flustered as she hurried toward the bathroom. "Alexa, what time is it?" Daniel asked again. It's 2:27 a.m., Alexa responded promptly. From the bathroom, Daniel heard Patricia mutter, "Oh my God." A few minutes later, she slipped under the covers and snuggled up next to him. "Alexa, what time is it now?" Daniel asked again, almost as if confirming the surreal nature of the moment. "It's 2:34 a.m., the device responded. The room fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence until Patricia's soft sobs broke through the stillness. "Daniel, I'm so sorry," she pleaded, her voice trembling with guilt. "We were talking, and time just got away from us. We didn't mean for it to get this late. Please, don't be upset. Don't be angry with Matt or me. It wasn't intentional." Her words spilled out, desperate and strained. Still lost in thought, Daniel turned away from her, his emotions swirling. "Let's talk in the morning," he advised, his voice flat. Despite her pleas, something didn't sit right with him. What could they possibly have been discussing that kept them out until the early hours of the morning? He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that there was more to this than she was letting on. As Daniel settled into bed next to Patricia, something unexpected hit him, an unmistakable scent. The faint fragrance of Amani's Acqua di Gio cologne clung to the bedsheets. It was the same cologne he remembered catching a whiff of when Matt had come to pick Patricia up earlier that evening. This wasn't just the kind of scent that lingered from across a dinner table. No, this was the scent of physical closeness. The undeniable truth washed over him as he lay there, the pieces falling into place. Patricia wasn't telling the whole story. It was clear that she and Matt had been together in more than just conversation. As Daniel slowly drifted back into a restless sleep, he accepted what had likely happened. At sunrise, Daniel woke up, the unmistakable scent of Acqua di Gio still lingering on Patricia's skin as she slept peacefully beside him, clearly exhausted from her night with Matt. There was no doubt left in his mind now. With this realization weighing heavily on him, Daniel got dressed quietly and left the house, driving aimlessly with no specific destination in mind. After about an hour of wandering, he found himself pulling into a Waffle House, where he ordered breakfast. As he sat there, eating his meal, everything began to fall into place. The woman he thought was his devoted wife had betrayed him. This wasn't some careless mistake. Patricia had made a conscious decision to deceive him for the sake of a fling with Matt. The realization stung, filling him with anger and humiliation. With his thoughts finally gathered, Daniel knew he had to confront her. After paying for his meal, he drove back home. When he arrived, he found Patricia sitting at the kitchen table, her head down as she cradled a cup of coffee. She looked disheveled, her face showing the toll of the previous night. Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. Neither of them said a word for several long, tense minutes. The silence hung thick between them, and Patricia couldn't even bring herself to meet his eyes, staring down at her coffee instead. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Patricia," he began, his voice calm but firm, "do you want to talk about it?" Sniffling, Patricia hesitated before whispering, "I'm so sorry, Daniel. It just spiraled out of control." Daniel leaned in slightly, his tone still steady. "What do you mean it got out of control? What happened?" "Well," Patricia began, her voice shaky, "after dinner, we went to a small cafe for coffee. We started talking, about climate change, sustainability, and all the work Matt's been doing with the government in other cities. We got caught up in the conversation, and before we realized it, it was already 1:30. We panicked, and he rushed to get me home. I'm so sorry, Daniel," she finished, her voice faltering. Daniel paused for a moment, then asked a seemingly out-of-the-blue question, "Do you like Acqua di Gio?" Patricia furrowed her brow in confusion. "What? Acqua di Gio, the men's cologne?" she asked, unsure where this was going. "Yes, Acqua di Gio by Armani. Do you like it?" Daniel pressed, watching her closely. Still confused, Patricia tried to make sense of the question. Why are you asking me that? Daniel kept his eyes on her, his tone flat. One of my coworkers uses Aqua di Gio. I've known that scent for years. I smelled it when Matt came to pick you up last night. Patricia's mind raced, and then it clicked. She remembered seeing a bottle of Aqua di Gio in Matt's bathroom. She also recalled how he had reapplied the cologne after using the bathroom, leaving the scent on his hands, the same hands that had been all over her. Panic settled in as the realization washed over her. She stayed silent, bracing herself for what was coming next. When you climbed into bed last night, the smell of Aqua di Gio was strong, Daniel continued, his voice controlled. I thought about it briefly, but as I lay next to you, I realized that scent was way too potent to have come from just sitting across the table from someone. So this morning, while you were still asleep, I smelled it again. That cologne was all over you, Patricia. No, no, no. Patricia cried defensively, shaking her head. Patricia, Daniel said calmly, that smell didn't just transfer to you from casual conversation or sitting across from someone at dinner. You two were clearly closer than that. Panic set in as Patricia tried to explain. Daniel, please. It's not what you think. After dinner, things just spiraled out of control. We didn't plan for it to happen. What exactly went out of control? Daniel asked, his voice still calm, almost too calm. Matt and I, we lost control, Patricia admitted, her voice breaking. It wasn't planned, it just happened. Tears streamed down her face as she repeated, it just happened. Daniel remained composed, his gaze steady. You and Matt lost control. What does that mean, Patricia? Patricia squirmed in her chair, desperate to escape the conversation, but Daniel's steady presence kept her rooted in place. There was no escaping now. All right, Patricia sobbed, her voice barely steady. I won't lie. We made love. I said it. It just happened, and I'm really sorry, but things just got out of hand. She sniffled, her eyes red and pleading. Daniel paused, letting her words hang in the air for a moment before speaking slowly. No, Patricia. Things didn't just get out of control. Everything happened exactly the way you intended it to. Patricia turned to him, confusion spreading across her face. What do you mean, as I intended? I mean, Daniel continued, you agreed to go out with him, and on a Friday night, no less. You spent the whole day getting ready, dressing yourself up as attractively as possible, knowing full well what would happen. No, Daniel. That's not true, Patricia protested, shaking her head. I never intended for any of this to happen. Patricia, Daniel insisted, his voice growing firmer, you left this house knowing you were going to sleep with Matt. That's not true, she cried out, her voice cracking under the weight of her denial. It is true, Patricia. And you've completely destroyed our marriage and everything we had, Daniel stated bluntly, not sugarcoating his words. Daniel, I haven't ruined our marriage. Patricia wailed. Yes, I made a terrible mistake, but I got caught up in the excitement, in the moment. It was wrong, but it'll never happen again. We can move past this if you stop accusing me, she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. Daniel wasn't having it. You lost yourself for a moment. How about for over 8 hours, he shot back. That's not fair, Daniel. Patricia sobbed. It's the truth, Patricia. You spent the entire evening with him until the early hours of this morning. That's more than 8 hours, and don't forget, you spent the whole day preparing for him. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. You've been planning this for days. I told you, I got carried away. Patricia cried, interrupting him, trying to justify her actions. Things spiraled out of control. But Daniel had already made up his mind. After a brief moment of reflection, he said, Patricia, I don't believe you. I don't buy that things just got out of control, and I definitely don't believe it just happened. No, I think you planned this. No, no, no. You have to believe me. Patricia sobbed harder, shaking her head as if she could erase Daniel's words. I don't believe you, Patricia, Daniel said calmly, his voice cutting through her pleas. I think when you left this house with Matt, you knew exactly what you were going to do. That was the whole reason you went out with him. Dinner was just a cover for what you really intended. Patricia shook her head in disbelief, unable to accept that Daniel could think this way about her. Desperate to escape the accusations, she tried to change the subject. Daniel, I love you. I love you more than anything in the world. You know that. We've had a good marriage, and we can work through this, please. We can move forward together. Her voice was pleading, hoping to appeal to the love they once shared. Daniel sat in silence for a few moments before finally turning to her, his expression hardened. No, I can't move past this, he said firmly. What you did, it's too much to just let go. Don't you see how you betrayed me? Last night, you lied to me, deceived me, and humiliated me. I didn't do that. I would never do that to you. Patricia screamed, her voice raw with emotion. God damn it, woman, you did. Daniel's voice exploded with fury. You went on a date right in front of me. You left me behind so you could sleep with another man, and you even lied to make it happen. Patricia, you're a real piece of work. Now crying uncontrollably, Patricia shouted, I didn't leave you. I would never leave you. I just made a horrible mistake. Daniel's voice steadied, though the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. Listen to me, Patricia, he said sternly. When you got your hair and nails done just for him, you left me. When you spent the whole day preparing yourself for him, you left me. When you dressed up to impress him, you left me. When you let him touch you, you left me. And when you got into his bed, Patricia, you left me. Hearing his brutal words, Patricia's head spun. Her tears fell even harder as she tried to find something to hold on to. But I came back to you. I'm here with you now. I'm not with him, I'm here with you. I came back, she pleaded, hoping that would somehow make things right. You came back to me, Daniel replied coldly, after spending the whole night giving yourself to another man. At that moment, Patricia realized there was no escaping the situation she found herself in. Desperation filled her voice as she threw her arms wide in frustration. What am I supposed to do, Daniel? Tell me how I can make this right. Daniel's reply was swift and cutting. You can spend the weekend finding yourself a divorce lawyer, he said coldly, because you're going to need one once I meet with mine next week. Divorce? Patricia cried out, her voice trembling. Why would you want a divorce? Because, Daniel said sternly, you no longer belong to me. You gave yourself to another man. No, no, that's not true. I am yours, and only yours. I made one stupid mistake, but it won't happen again. It was a reckless, one-time thing, Patricia pleaded. But you did it, Patricia. You gave yourself to him, and now a part of you belongs to him, Daniel shot back, his words sharp. But I came back to you, Patricia protested, her voice shaky. I belong to you. No one else. Yeah, you came back to me at almost 2:30 in the morning, after giving yourself to him, Daniel replied harshly. After dressing up and letting him have you however he wanted. It wasn't like that, Patricia tried to explain, her voice cracking under the weight of his accusations. Patricia, Daniel continued relentlessly, you prepared yourself for him, you offered yourself to him, and he took you. Don't you get it? A piece of you is his now, and it always will be. Tears streamed down her face as Patricia choked out, I made a mistake. I didn't even realize what I was doing. My emotions, my hormones, they took control. I made a terrible choice. Daniel's patience was gone. I'm not interested in your excuses, he snapped arrogantly. Please, Daniel, she begged, her voice trembling with desperation. It only happened once. It was just one time. I don't care if it was just once, Daniel shouted, his anger spilling over. Daniel, please don't do this to us. For the love of God, don't tear us apart, Patricia cried, her voice breaking. I'm not the one doing this to us, Patricia. You did this, Daniel said firmly, his voice calm but resolute. He paused for a moment, then continued, the legal process will take some time, but make no mistake, it's over. As far as I'm concerned, our marriage is finished. Don't say that, Daniel, Patricia sobbed. I know we can work this out. There's nothing to work out, Daniel said coldly. We're done. Finished. No, Patricia pleaded, her voice frantic. We can't be done. I made a huge mistake, a stupid, impulsive choice, but we can get through this if you just forgive me and let me make it up to you. Patricia, Daniel replied, his tone flat, there's no forgiving this, and there's no making it up. We're over. He stood up from the table, his decision final. I'm done talking. Without another word, Daniel walked away, leaving Patricia sitting there alone. She placed her elbows on the table, staring blankly into her cup of coffee. Her once perfect life had crumbled in what seemed like an instant, and she had no one to blame but herself. She had ruined everything, for what? A brief fling with Matt Adams. Yes, Matt Adams. The man who was unlike anyone else Patricia had ever met. Polished, self-assured, impeccable manners, cultured, well-educated, athletic, he had every trait that had drawn her in. Patricia Spencer Brown had fallen hard for him. Enamored with Matt, she allowed herself to get lost in fantasies about the two of them together, especially in bed. The rumors she'd heard her entire life about men like Matt, about their physical prowess and how they could heighten the experience for a woman, only fueled her fantasies further. Eventually, it reached a point where, almost every night before drifting off to sleep, Patricia would imagine herself making love to Matt. Each morning, she'd wake up with the same thoughts swirling in her mind. Day after day, working alongside him on the climate change project, she struggled to stay focused, her mind constantly drifting back to being with Matt. Over time, those thoughts consumed her. It wasn't long before Patricia hit a breaking point, feeling like her mind, body, and soul would explode if she didn't act on her desires. That's when her primal instincts took over, and she started planning how to make her fantasies a reality. In her mind, it wasn't an affair, not something long-term or even short-term. It was just a moment, something she thought she could compartmentalize. All Patricia had wanted was one night with Matt, just once, to get it out of her system. She was convinced that after that, she would be satisfied and could go back to her normal life. Because it was only a single time and not some ongoing affair, she rationalized that it didn't really matter that she was married. Her vows to Daniel, the promises to be faithful and forsake all others, didn't feel relevant in that moment. In her mind, she wasn't cheating. That morning, she didn't see it as a betrayal. To Patricia, this was about pursuing a fleeting experience, and Matt Adams was the ultimate prize, the epitome of masculinity she had craved for just one night. She convinced herself that it would be something she could hold on to in her memories forever, without it affecting her marriage. She felt certain that Matt liked her, and if the right opportunity presented itself, he would be open to it. All she had to do was give him the chance. After much consideration, Patricia found the perfect opportunity in a business dinner, disguising her intentions behind a professional meeting. She was sure that Matt would play along, especially since they had discussed dinner before. She vividly remembered Matt mentioning how, with their busy schedules, lunch was too hard to coordinate, so a dinner meeting made more sense. She knew how to signal to him that this could be more than just a work dinner. By dressing as enticing and seductive as possible, Patricia believed she could send him the message that she was ready, waiting for him to make his move, if he picked up on the signals. Her plan was simple: after an early dinner, they'd retreat to a hotel, spend a few hours wrapped in each other's arms, make love, and she would be back home around 10. But now, looking back, she realized that she had underestimated one major complication: Daniel. He was prone to jealousy and always had a suspicious nature. Patricia had scheduled this dinner while Daniel was in town, planning it right under his nose. She even sought his approval, making sure he knew about the dinner without having any clue about what would happen afterward in Matt's hotel room. It was a calculated, deceptive move to quell his suspicions, and it almost worked. Daniel had his doubts, but not enough to stop her. Reluctantly, he agreed to let them go to dinner. Strangely, Patricia found Daniel's jealousy toward Matt thrilling. It added an extra layer of excitement to the evening. Matt, meanwhile, picked up on her cues even before they had left the driveway. The idea of a formal dinner was quickly abandoned. They rushed straight to Matt's hotel, eager to take full advantage of the opportunity. Things spiraled out of control just as Patricia had imagined. The night unfolded exactly as she had fantasized. But when Matt woke up to use the bathroom just after 1 a.m., the illusion shattered, and reality came crashing down. Both of them realized the gravity of what they had done. Patricia was a wreck, and Matt, full of regret, wanted to escape. Still, they lingered together for a little longer before Patricia finally made it home. By Saturday morning, after Daniel had confronted her, Patricia began to understand the full weight of her mistake. Daniel was resolute: divorce was the only option. There would be no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no second chances. The rest of the weekend was a blur of self-pity for Patricia, as she cursed herself for letting things spiral so far out of control. Although the thrill and passion of Friday night would replay in her mind at times, those moments were brief. The harsh reality always yanked her back to the present: she had lost Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel was consumed by anger. He seethed over Patricia's utter disregard for him and the audacity of going on what was essentially a date right in front of him. He couldn't fathom how she thought he wouldn't catch on, how she could believe he was that naive. Daniel had never been naive enough to believe Patricia's weak excuse that she and Matt had spent the night discussing climate change and sustainability. By Monday, he had already found a lawyer and, by the afternoon, he met with him. By 7 p.m., the divorce paperwork was ready to be submitted the next day. Daniel was moving full speed ahead, determined to end things with Patricia as quickly as possible. That evening, when he returned home, Patricia was waiting, hopeful that they could talk things through. She thought enough time had passed, and maybe he had cooled down enough to work things out. But Daniel, blunt as ever, told her he had already filed for divorce and that she would receive the papers by the end of the week. He also informed her that he was pursuing an at-fault divorce, citing her affair with Matt. When Patricia heard this, chaos erupted. Not wanting to deal with her meltdown, Daniel called her family and friends, explaining what had happened and asking them to come be with her. Once they arrived, Daniel left the house, staying away for hours. The next day, Patricia's family and friends spent the better part of the day trying to talk to Daniel. They pleaded with him, asking him to reconsider, to forgive her, and to try to save the marriage. But Daniel had made up his mind. By Tuesday evening, it was obvious to everyone that their relationship, and therefore their marriage, was beyond saving. Then, on Wednesday morning, Matt Adams reached out to Daniel. To his surprise, Daniel actually answered the call. "Hello, Daniel. It's Matt Adams. Thanks for taking my call." Daniel's irritation was obvious as he replied, "What do you want, Matt?" "I need to talk to you about Friday night," Matt said, sounding almost hesitant. Still furious, Daniel snapped back, "What's there to talk about? You took my wife out under the pretense of dinner, brought her to a hotel, slept with her, and then sent her back to me smelling like you. And you think I'm just jealous?" Matt, trying to explain, said, "Things got out of control, and that's why I'm calling." Daniel, still seething, shot back, "Fine, I'm listening." But Matt insisted, "We need to talk about this in person, not over the phone." Shocked, Daniel asked, "You want to meet face to face?" Matt confirmed, "Yes, the sooner, the better." Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. After all that had happened, Matt wanted to meet in person. Isn't that a bit strange? Daniel asked, baffled. You want to meet the man whose wife you were with? There was a brief silence on the other end before Matt spoke again. Yeah, probably. But this is something I need to do. And I think you need to hear me out. Daniel couldn't help but ask, aren't you at all worried that I might kill you? Or at the very least, beat you senseless? Matt paused before responding, well, I figure I deserve whatever you might do to me. But I'll take my chances and hope we can keep things civil. Daniel thought the whole situation was insane, but decided to go along with it. Okay, this afternoon at 3, does that work for you? He asked. Matt agreed, and by the afternoon, they found themselves sitting outside a Starbucks. Matt wasted no time, diving right into the conversation. Daniel, I talked to Patricia yesterday, and she's really upset. She told me you're planning to divorce her. Is that true? Or are you just thinking about it? Daniel, calm and composed, replied, no, I'm not thinking about divorcing her. I'm already divorcing her. In fact, the paperwork was filed yesterday. Matt, sounding desperate, exclaimed, no, no, no. You can't do that. You just can't. Confused, Daniel asked, what do you mean I can't do that? Because it's wrong. Completely wrong, Matt responded, almost pleading. Daniel smirked at Matt's words. Patricia is a good woman, Matt added, trying to make his case. But Daniel wasn't swayed. Let me put it plainly for you, Matt. My wife, that good woman, used me so she could be with you. Matt tried to interrupt, man, I told you, it was poor judgment. A lapse that destroyed my marriage, Daniel said without missing a beat. Then, with heavy sarcasm, he asked, this might be a dumb question, but I've got to ask, are you and Patricia in love? No, man, we're not in love, Matt replied quickly. I like Patricia, and she likes me, but that's as far as it goes. She loves you, not me, and that's why I wanted to meet in person. You need to understand, we got carried away, but it's over now. It won't happen again. Matt added, his voice tinged with genuine regret, Daniel, I'm really sorry for what we did. I wish I could undo Friday night, but I can't. Staring directly into Matt's eyes, Daniel spoke bitterly. No, you can't undo it, and she can't erase the memory of being with you, either. That's the real problem. A part of her will always belong to you now, and she'll never fully be mine again. You'll always be in her mind, and I can't live like that. As Daniel laid bare the lasting damage of Patricia's affair, Matt felt sick to his stomach. He hadn't truly understood the consequences of his actions until now. Before Matt could respond, Daniel took a deep breath and continued, and there's more. She can't undo everything she did to me just to be with you. That's why I'm divorcing her. Suddenly, Matt blurted out, damn it. His outburst drew the attention of the people around them at Starbucks, and the table fell silent. Sensing the tension, Matt nervously asked, so, what's your plan for me now? Daniel, clearly seething, leaned across the table and locked eyes with Matt. Look at me, he demanded. Matt raised his eyes, his discomfort obvious. Daniel continued, if I were the man I used to be, I'd pull out my .45 and blow your head off right here. Matt flinched visibly at the threat, but Daniel kept going. But I'm not that man anymore, he added, his voice calm but chilling. So I'll handle this more civilly. What does that mean? Matt asked, his voice shaking with fear. Without hesitation, Daniel replied, this state doesn't have an alienation of affection law, so I can't sue you as part of the divorce. You're safe in that regard. Daniel paused for a moment, thinking to himself before adding, however, the law firm I'm working with is very conservative. And to them, you're the guy who broke up my marriage. They might see this as an opportunity to take some political shots at the climate change movement, at your expense. Matt's face went pale. He had been bracing for physical harm, but this was a blow he hadn't anticipated. Daniel could see the panic spreading across Matt's face as the reality set in. "Daniel, please don't do this to me," Matt pleaded. Daniel, remaining composed, said calmly, "I've already given them free rein to go after you. By the end of the week, Patricia will be officially served with the divorce papers. Once she signs them, the story will break, both in the media and on social networks. You can guess what happens after that." Desperate, Matt cried, "You can't do this. It's illegal. I'll sue you for defamation." Daniel responded coldly, "No, it's not illegal to tell the truth, as long as they don't lie. And the truth is that you had an affair with a married woman and wrecked her marriage. That's the story they'll tell, and the court of public opinion will handle the rest. The conservative media and political groups will have a field day with you." Matt was left stunned, imagining the fallout if his affair went public. Barely able to speak, he whispered, "You'll destroy me. You'll ruin my reputation, everything I've worked for." Daniel didn't flinch. "Maybe it won't completely ruin you," he said, "but your reputation will definitely take a hit. Conservatives will use you and Patricia as a prime example to attack the climate change movement." Matt, still in shock, asked, "Don't you see this will destroy Patricia too?" Daniel nodded. "I do. And you don't care?" Matt asked, almost incredulous. "Why should I?" Daniel shot back without hesitation. "When you two were fooling around in that hotel room, did you ever think about me?" Daniel demanded, his voice sharp. Matt stayed silent, not knowing how to respond. "Well, did you?" Daniel pressed again. "It wasn't about you," Matt finally admitted, his voice low. "It was about us." Daniel's anger flared again. "And you didn't think I'd find out, did you?" "But I did. And you both screwed up." His voice grew louder, drawing glances from the nearby tables at Starbucks, though he held back from completely losing control. Daniel took a breath and asked, "Do you remember what I said before you left with Patricia?" Matt shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "No, not really." "What did you say?" "I warned you not to do something you'd regret." Matt nodded, regret clear in his eyes. "Yeah, you did. I should have listened." "Yeah, you should have," Daniel shot back, his voice cold and unyielding. "Daniel, please, just take a moment and reconsider," Matt pleaded, trying one last time. "I've thought it through," Daniel replied, his tone firm. "There's nothing left to discuss." Matt knew Daniel wasn't going to budge, but he made one more desperate attempt. "Daniel, don't divorce Patricia. Move on, man. Forget about it. Don't throw away a good woman just because I made a bad decision." Daniel laughed bitterly at Matt's words. "It's over," he said flatly. "I'm not throwing anything away. You two did that." Later, after leaving Starbucks, Daniel returned home to pack for his upcoming trip to Najahal National Park in India. But when he walked through the door, he found Patricia in yet another emotional meltdown. This time, she had spoken to Matt, who had told her about Daniel's plans to publicly ruin him. "Daniel," Matt called, Patricia cried, her voice desperate. "He said your lawyers are going to destroy him. Is that true?" Daniel, showing little concern, simply replied, "Maybe." "Why are you doing this?" Patricia yelled, exasperated. Without missing a beat, Daniel fired back, "Why did you betray me? Why did you lie, manipulate, and cheat on me? Why, Patricia? Why did you give yourself to another man?" Sobbing, Patricia could only stammer, "I don't know, Daniel. I really don't know. Something took over you." Daniel mocked. "I don't believe you, Patricia. I think you're lying." She insisted through her tears, "I'm not lying. Something clouded my judgment." "Look at me," Daniel demanded. Patricia raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his. In a couple of days, you'll be served with divorce papers, Daniel said coldly. No, Daniel. Please, she begged. Don't do this to us. We can fix this. Daniel's response was without sympathy. When those papers arrive, just sign them. Let's end this. Don't fight me. Patricia, desperate, pleaded again, please, don't do this. Daniel's tone remained ice-cold. You did this, Patricia. Remember, you said it was just dinner, but it wasn't just dinner, was it? No, it was an affair, and you got caught. You ruined us. I've been such a fool, Patricia admitted, guilt etched in her voice. Yes, you have, Daniel confirmed, his voice flat. You gave a part of yourself to someone else, and now you're no longer mine. Since you're not fully mine anymore, I don't want to be with you. So, sign the papers and get out of my life. His words hit her like a blow, and Daniel, now shouting, stormed upstairs. He grabbed some bags, came back down to pack his camera gear, and without another word, left the house. He headed for a hotel where he planned to stay until his trip to India. Months later, Patricia finally signed the divorce papers, legally ending their marriage. Daniel's lawyers, in collaboration with a conservative political action group, launched a smear campaign against Matt. It didn't just tarnish his reputation, it severely damaged the broader climate change movement he had been part of. Matt was ostracized from the community, losing valuable consulting contracts as his public image collapsed. To make matters worse, the political left falsely branded him a sexual predator, further ruining his standing. As for Patricia, the divorce settlement left her with enough money to support herself, but far from comfortably. She spiraled into anxiety and depression, struggling to move forward and making little progress in rebuilding her life. After finishing his assignment in India, Daniel returned home to finalize the divorce before heading to Africa to continue his work as a professional hunter and photographer. There, he led expeditions tracking the Big Five: elephants, rhinos, buffalo, lions, and leopards. The thrill of the wild and the intensity of his work kept him focused, leaving little room to dwell on the past. Meanwhile, Patricia, still deeply struggling with the aftermath of their divorce, sent him countless emails, begging for another chance. Though Daniel occasionally replied, it was clear from his responses that he had no intention of rekindling their relationship. His words were polite but distant, giving no hope for reconciliation. As Patricia's emotional turmoil deepened, she saved every penny she could, clinging to the dream that one day she might follow him to Africa, hoping that, somehow, being near him would change things.